Welcome to Business Mastery with Dawn Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Today, we're talking about you, the operator, the leader, the founder, the person who is trying to drive the ship and making sure that you're not getting lost yourself in the business that you're growing. So I have Brian on here. We're going to dive into this incredibly important topic, not fusing your identity in such a way that you lose your vision. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Don. I'm happy to be here.
Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
My name is Brian Thompson. I'm the founder and financial planner at Brian Thompson Financial. We help mission-driven entrepreneurs make impactful and profitable businesses.
I love it. All right. So when you and I were first talking about this, I've got note here from before is the question that kept coming up is who is driving the ship? So we just start there? How do we answer that question? Because I think it's easy to say something like a label is driving the ship, right? Go on the CEO or on the COO or who is actually driving this ship?
So I actually find that a lot of people come to me and realize that the business itself is driving the ship, right? The business has developed its own personality and sort of taken on its own momentum of where it wants to go. And so we usually try to take a step back and say, well, you are the business owner. You are the person that created this business. So you should build this business with intention. And that starts with knowing what you want to build. So we always start with mission, vision, and values. What are you trying to accomplish? What impact do you want to make? What do you envision this thing is going to be? And what things are steering you to make sure that you can keep focused and that the business doesn't take over itself, but you are still in control and building this business with intention.
So where you say the business takes over itself, right? So it starts to get out there. You've got employees. It's sort of running in the most beautifully boring way, right? We're starting to do the things with systems involved, and people recognize the company maybe outside the founder. Do you find that sometimes founders are distressed by this realization?
Yeah, right. It's you create this thing and it becomes your child, your baby. You see it grow, you nurture it. And then if it becomes something that is outside of you, it's probably unnerving. And you likely feel a bit untethered because this has been your identity. This has been who you are and what you built and why you built it. And now it's its own thing. So I definitely understand the discomfort and the anxiety around it becoming something else. And that's why, again, I say, like, you get to build whatever you want. You get to build whatever you want. So making sure that you have the intention and the control over what you want to build. And maybe you do want it to grow outside of you. Maybe that's your intention. That's okay too. But it has to start somewhere. You have to start with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build and making sure that you're going in the right direction.
So we often see mission statements, vision statement, value statements tied to a company, but I think when we were talking too, the founder needs to have those personally as well.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And I guess the question is I think when we start something and we build and we kind of get fused there, it's easy to look up and go, well, I mean, it's working. We'll put the same thing on the website, right? Why would we change it now? But a big part of what you do is also making sure that people are getting out of it on a personal level, sort of what they're also putting in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The whole premise of my business is that you can have the impact that you want, but also build an incredible life for yourself. Both of those things can be true. And like you said, it needs to go back to something that you can look back on and say, these are my mission. This is my vision. These are my values. And not only for me personally, but for the business. And those are separate. And I'm a big fan of exercises. So your question was, how do we do that? You go through exercises. We have values exercises where you start with 100 values, and you narrow them down to 30, and then you narrow them down to 15, then you narrow them down to 5. And that process of trying to figure out, what do these mean to me and how can I test them, is really what then helps you implement them in a way that makes sense and that feels like you and that feels like you're on the right track rather than it going all over the place.
So what happens when your values evolve as a human and it's no longer aligning exactly with what you thought the business would be, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago?
Yeah. That's a very hard point to be in, and you have to make a decision, right? Is it this? Do you let go of the business at this point, or do you change the business? And I think alignment is key in everything that you do, because if you're not aligned, the business will not succeed. So if you realize that you're not in alignment, you have to figure out a way to get back in alignment and see what that looks like, and turn the business in a way that you feel like is aligned with what you're trying to build and who you are, or let it go and give it to somebody else, right? There's nothing wrong with walking away from a business. There's nothing wrong with letting a business become something else that it wants to become. Um, but if that's not your goal, not your vision, it's not gonna grow in the way that you want it to.
Yeah, let's look at this a little bit too, where if you let go of something else, I I wonder how many people would feel comfortable saying we've evolved apart from each other, as humans, right? So, business mastery and just in business, you have to evolve as a human being. So when you evolve beyond or past your business, where do you see people coming to you and being like, I don't know, this doesn't look anything like it used to.
Yeah, yeah, I do get that, and I've learned in being a business owner and working with business owners that you have to be okay with this gray area, the unexpected, and being able to sort of let things evolve as they evolved, and knowing that just because something has changed or because something is ending doesn't mean it's bad. You can have a good experience and learn from that experience and then go on to something new. Letting go of something doesn't mean it's a failure. Doing something different doesn't mean that you failed at being a business owner. It just means you've evolved. And we all evolve, we all change. And as long as we're doing that internal work of what is valuable to us, what are we aligned with to ourselves and to who we want to be, evolving and doing something different should then take you to the next level. And being okay with things changing and things ending, I think that's just a part of being a business owner. And I say this with prospects and clients all the time. Like, just because we're not working together doesn't mean either of us are bad or wrong. It just means we're not a good fit. If we're not a good fit, we shouldn't waste time trying to force something. We should go on to find the right fit.
So let's talk about the external pressure and the perspectives of people who are kind of outside the business. They may be people who are in the business community, but they tend to sometimes look at these types of evolutions as threatening, or in some ways, there's pressure to maintain the status quo. And I know that family pressure comments, because we all get them. Uh,
Yeah.
so those external factors, those people who are telling you, oh, why are you giving that up? It was doing so well. Oh, you're no longer good at XYZ. Why are you only doing it this way now? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I remember when you guys used to do this and you don't do those anymore.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about managing those things? Because it's easy to have a very strong business mindset when you're dealing with business things. Is it as comfortable at the family reunion? When you're bringing, the dish and you're supposed to sit there and you've gotta field some of these, legitimate questions from people who have watched you closely over the years. I think that there is a need, of course, to that acceptance, as human beings and families. How do we approach that piece? Or how do we put it
Mhm.
so that if our values no longer align with maybe the external people who have been watching us, that's gotta be an uncomfortable place as well, because
Super uncomfortable.
it's evolving into the business owner as an entity or an identity, and then realizing that you've grown out of that while everyone was
Mm.
watching.
Yeah.
I know there's gonna be a few people listening who are like, "Yeah, I hear it every time I call, my cousin or
Yeah.
whatever." Um, how do we deal with that, I guess,
Yeah.
is the thing, because I know leaving isn't always comfortable, because it's even though what you want, maybe it's not what the external pressure is telling you.
Yeah. I love this question because I'm a people pleaser by nature. I've grown up making sure that people liked me, and I was tried to really engage in everyone and make sure that I was liked, and make all that is from the past behaviors of I don't want people to leave me. I want to feel valuable. Um, but this question of to everybody has an opinion. Everybody's gonna have an opinion, especially when you put yourself out there. We're on a podcast, we're on social media. People see us and see what we're doing, and they will have an opinion. And at some point, I realized that I'm not for everyone. And being able to internalize, I'm not for everyone and I don't need to be, is actually a superpower around these, other than these thoughts around you should be doing this or what happened, you've changed. As long as you feel aligned and okay with who you are and what you're doing, and I think this goes back to making sure that you are centered in your values,
Yeah.
and you change and people have an opinion about that, that's okay. But these are my values and they're for me, they're not your values. And having that foundation and making sure that you can build off of that and know that you are aligned in what you're doing, then other people's opinions won't matter as much anymore because you are building what you want for you. I mean, obviously, there's got to be a balance there. Like, you got to build something that serves other people. But my guess is at your core values and what you're doing, and if your mission is to really help and make a business that has an impact, that you are serving some population. And so you have to get clear on who that population is. And it may not be the people that are commenting on how you changed or what you're doing. And that's okay. People can have their opinion, but as long as you are really core anchored in yourself and say, I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. I think that helps with all of the other noise around and the questions that you have to answer at the family reunion, because you are centered in who you are.
So, your values exercise, how often do you recommend people examine their personal values, maybe separate and aside from the business values that are on the website and, tweak as necessary or, as you said earlier, leave as necessary?
Yeah, it really depends. And I think the real, like, you start off figuring out what your values are, but I think the real work comes in testing the values and it's in all those everyday decisions that we make, making sure that the decisions that you make about taking on that new client or selling that new product or putting out a new advertisement, those are your opportunities to test your values and see if they've changed. And so you can go back to them. It's not a one and done thing. It's something that you go back to and say, is this decision aligned with the values that I have? And is this decision aligned with my business values? And is it aligned with my personal values? Knowing that those are two distinct things, that question comes up all the time. Are we talking about my business values or my personal values?
Right.
We're talking about both, right? You have to have both. And maybe there's some overlap or maybe there's a lot of difference, but you have to know what they are. And then you have to test them and saying, does this align in every decision that you make? So you're going to be coming back to them over and over and over again. And maybe, especially if there's a big life event, I just had clients who had a baby, right?
Mm.
Um, that changed their mindset around their business,
Yeah.
how much they want to work, how much they want to do, how much money they need to make. So we go back to the foundation. All right. So let's just start over. Start from a clean slate. What are your values now? And being able to start those big events, I think, are a way to just recenter and refocus. But again, you're going to be doing this over and over again. You're going to be testing them along the way. So it's never a one and done thing.
So let's tie this to the feelings that sometimes we had made a decision, it's being executed, and then we realize that it doesn't maybe feel the same way it did 6
Hmm.
months or a year ago, kind of this idea again of values. Can we tie these values and our value statements, judgments, and what's important to us to maybe how it feels sometimes when we're evolving and it maybe doesn't feel like it's alignment, but maybe it is?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's there's always gonna be gray, so you're never gonna know for sure if this is working or not, and, I love being a business owner because it's changed my perspective completely around control, around knowing the future, around certainty. Like, nothing is ever certain, and I used to think, "Oh, well, I'm working for a law firm, so I think I can be here for 10 years and become a partner," and, like, all of those things can change, and it's the same with a business. You can get in a business and start in one direction and realize that that's not for you, and it doesn't feel right, and that's telling you something. Those feelings that you're feeling on the inside are telling you something needs to change, and you need to do something differently. And so my concept goes back to the lean startup model of build, measure, learn. You want that cycle. You wanna build something, test it out, and then see, what are you learning from this, and what are you feeling from this? And being able to engage with those feelings and know that, again, if you have to change directions or you have to change what you're doing, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It means you just tried something and it didn't work out. That's okay. This is how businesses work, and this is how you build really good businesses because you're trying things all the time. And if it doesn't feel right, change. If it doesn't feel aligned, do something differently. Try something else. Keep build, measuring, learning as you go, so you can build the business that you want that feels right and aligned.
So let's talk about this through sort of a timeline of things, right? Because when you start, obviously you're very excited. This idea is working. You make your first few sales, you make your first few investments, everything feels really great. And I'm gonna challenge this idea that sometimes some of the hardest decisions that are the right ones may not feel as easy as
Mm,
they did when you first started. So I'm gonna say that maybe some of that is as you're maturing as a business owner and you've got the test and you've got the measure and you're seeing what's working, maybe we can rely a little bit less on how we feel in the decision and maybe how we feel in the result. Because I
mm,
think the biggest thing is we start to lose our excitement, right? Like every decision is no longer super excited. Oh, we're reordering paper towels. That's the right thing to do. It's aligned with what we do here. But this is just it's not as exciting or fun. And I wonder how
mm.
often we rely on those feelings to guide us when maybe again we should go back to this idea of getting to values and things that will hold even if it's not exciting.
Yeah. Um, I it's funny because I talk about this all the time that those feelings that go away, the excitement that you have when you first start your business, the excitement of your first sale, and then you just sort of get used to it and you take it for granted. And
Mhm.
and so a lot of what we do, especially when I'm doing my coaching one-on-one meetings, is we talk about what are your successes, what are your challenges, making sure that you can really highlight your successes so you can celebrate them and know that this is not just you don't want to just get into it. Like you don't. I heard you say we focus on results, and I'm like, oh no, like I don't want to focus on results. I want to focus on process and make sure that the process, like we've talked about, has been aligned with what you want to do. But you're focusing on what you can control. You can't control an outcome. You can't control the result. But what you can control are making sure that the decisions that you make are in line with the thing that you want to build and the thing that you want to make. So I say focus on those things that you can control, focus on process, focus on systems, and then let the results be what they are and keep learning along the way. But if you focus on the results and making sure that you're selling a certain amount of money, when you get to that point, it's going to change,
Mm.
right? And when you accomplish that certain client goal or client revenue or the amount of clients, it's going to change. It's going to evolve. So you will always be searching and chasing this thing that you'll never get, and you'll miss what this is about. Building a business is fun and exciting and hard and anxiety producing and it's a journey. And I know as cliche as it sounds, it is about the journey. It is about the experience of building something that can be impactful, but can also give you the life that you want. And if you keep chasing results, you're never going to get it, and you're going to miss the entire point of what you've built and why you built it.
So we really don't celebrate enough as business
Mm,
owners.
Not
We
enough,
like
not nearly enough. And this is why that's why I say like it's important to take time out and step out from the outside of the business because the analogy that I like to think about is walking up a winding staircase.
Mhm.
Everything looks the same because you're looking at the same wall until you look down and realize how far you've come. And if you don't take those moments to look down and realize, oh, and also this is why we keep track of success and challenge, so we can look back and say, remember when you thought you just needed to get money to pay your expenses, and that was you were gonna be fine then. You're there now, and you're making more money than you ever thought you would, but now you're wanting even more, right? Being able to step back and say, "Look, you've done a great job. You're doing great. There's still a lot of things to do. There's still a lot of things to learn. There's always gonna be something to do in the business. There's always gonna be a problem in the business to solve, and that's part of the fun. That's part of the process. And if you don't take a moment to celebrate and look down, you're gonna miss it all."
Yeah, I think that it's so easy to get into the daily grind, if you will, that we forget, the 5 year, the 8 year, the 10 year, the
Yeah.
16 year, and then you wake up and you're like, wait a minute. Maybe it's not that we're not aligned anymore. Maybe it's I haven't stopped to look at what
Mm.
my values brought me to here and then
Yep.
where they can take me further. So in your practice, the new things like babies and things that change and milestones, what about just sort of those quiet evolutions? Do you see that people sometimes come to these realizations without these big milestones, or are we generally driven to stop and look only when something major happens or a big account gets landed or something? It's interesting because when we were talking, about the human in the business, about who you are and your values,
Yeah.
what are those reminders that we should be holding on to if we really are the species that looks up and goes, "Oh, we had this big thing. Now it's time to look."
Yeah. I do think we are actually hardwired to focus on big things and focus on hard moments, focus on the bad, the negative.
Mm.
Um, and eh, I was a philosophy major in college, so this is actually taking me back to my thesis on the problem of evil, right? Why does evil exist? And a lot of people think evil exists because that's the only way we learn, right? We only learn from bad things happening because when good things are happening, we just get used to it. Like we were talking about, we get used to it. And then all of a sudden we think that this is the norm and we don't take time to really experience the good things that are happening, the gratitude. As I mentioned, I love exercises. So I personally do every night a gratitude journal. I have a gratitude buddy that I text the 5 things that I'm grateful for, because I don't want to. And I'm not immune to this, right? I'm also focused on big moments and focus on bad things. So I'm trying to use these moments and these exercises to bring myself back to the present, to appreciate my successes and challenges, be grateful for the things that are going on, whether they feel like they're negative or they feel like they're positive. Those things can usually one and the same. Um, Getting yourself in the mindset, journaling is also a big one for me. Making sure that I'm getting everything out of my head so I can be present for moments like this, right? We were talking at the very beginning. I love these conversations. I love that I get to do this in my business, to get to talk to people about how businesses grow and what we do and who we are as human beings, because we're complex beings, we're complex systems, and figuring out what people do differently and just put more tools in my toolbox because what works for me may not work for you. But we can learn from each other, especially in these conversations, and make sure that we are growing as humans and making sure that we're growing in the way that we want to, that feels aligned, that feels like who we are. So yes, and right, yes, those big moments are times that we can refocus. Bad moments can help us, change and make the business that we want. But we can't forget those good moments, and we can't forget to hold on to those good moments and be present for those good moments because this is the fun about building a business. It's going to be all in the same.
Let's talk a little bit about the gratitude journal because I think it's kind of a cliche anymore. They hear on the web go, "I'm grateful for the lessons." Uh, Thinking that came across a little snarkier than I am. Apologize.
I heard that.
And
I
anyone
heard
in
the
the
snark
audience,
in
they're
there.
like, "Wow." Um, but I think that's sorta kinda become the cliche a little bit that,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be grateful. We're supposed to be thinking about the 3 things that went well today before we go to bed,
Yeah.
and I wonder if we, sorta still struggle with that true, uh, the true place where it's like we're in the journey, we're seeing it, we're trying to stay aligned, we're doing all the things, something happens, and, it's, "Oh, I'm grateful for the lesson," and we don't necessarily stop and give it much more than that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about this gratitude journal or gratitude practice is, the honesty, the deep honesty that has to happen there, I'm assuming is something maybe some of us need to confront.
Yeah. I think, in my practice, the more that I've done it, the better I've gotten at it. So being able to really sit down, it started with things, "Oh, I'm grateful for food, I'm grateful for my bed, I'm grateful for having shelter," right? Which are things that I'm actually grateful for, but the more that I do it, and the more that I know that I have to do it every day, and, hearing his gratitudes, every day has helped us sort of evolve and change. But you're right, it can get generic, and, I think that's where you have to take a step back. If you feel like it's getting generic, you feel like it's out of line, maybe it's not a practice for you. I'm always of the mindset, you take what you like and leave the rest. All these tools that we talk about that you doing, try them. If they work for you, great. If they don't, throw it away, do something else. But this gratitude practice works for me, and it works for me because I take a step back and say, what am I actually grateful for today? And testing, like we talked about, we like how you test values, going back and saying, am I actually grateful for this conversation? Right? I'm sure this will go on my gratitude list today. Um, being able to really be genuine with myself and align and this thing that we keep going back to, alignment, making sure that you know who you are as a human being, that you know who you want to be and how you want to grow and where you want to evolve. If you are centered in that person, then you can come from a genuine place of, I'm grateful for these things, or I appreciate these things, or this practice works for me, this practice doesn't work for me. And just because it works for me doesn't mean it has to work for you. But knowing that I am who I am and it works for me helps keep you centered and helps keep you really authentic and genuine about what you're doing in the practice.
So let's separate that from the identity that you have in a business, because I do know that there are people who are like, I'm grateful for all the things that happen in my business. I'm grateful for my employees. I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for, the late delivery because, we didn't get ruined in the thunderstorm, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But then being grateful as the human, not the founder, CEO,
Mm.
boss person. I'm sure there's some overlap, but it
Mhm.
sounds like finding out who you are as a human had to happen separately, maybe from the business itself.
This is always a tough question, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on it. I feel like we're evolving to this place where there is no like. There was a time when you had to be the CEO, you had to be the person that knew everything, that had all the answers that people could come to, that was reliable. I think we're shifting into a more human approach of being a leader, knowing that you don't have to know everything, that you don't always have to show up as the most happy, genuine self. I don't have to be grateful for the delivery because you can be mad about the late delivery because it caused a delay in your service. I think it's this um, really getting in tune with what you're feeling and the feelings that we talked about before, and making sure that you're not pushing them down or putting them aside. I don't think having a gratitude journal is meaning that you can't be mad, you can't be frustrated, you can't be angry. Um, And, believe me, for the longest time, people used to think I was a robot because I didn't have any feelings. Um, and it took me a long time to figure out what these feelings how to engage with the feelings. It took therapy, it took a lot of practice to really engage with, what I'm feeling and being angry, being frustrated. When we first got on, you asked me how I was feeling today. Actually, when I get that question, I stop and think, "All right, how am I feeling today? Am I feeling rushed? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling rested? Am I feeling content?" I try to just genuinely say, check in with myself. How am I feeling? And I think when we can get to a place where we don't need to be the CEO or be the COO or be the person that has all the answers, that's not a human being. We as human are complex and we have many different types of emotions and have feelings and has ups and downs all in the same day. So if we can genuinely be that person and we can engage as people, whether we are the CEO, whether we're the person who's brand new, the brand new intern, being able to really engage as human beings, I think we will evolve into a better place where we then grow together. We know that everybody has something to share, everybody has something to contribute, and um, we can grow as better as a business because we're open and we're not trying to pretend, we're not role playing. We're actually just growing and being human beings.
Do you think some of this evolution has to do with the rise of automation, AI, those kinds of things, where people don't want to necessarily talk to chatbots, and they would be okay if someone was having a bad day because they're more in tune to the humanity of interaction?
Yeah.
It's interesting that I would say even 5 years ago, having a podcast conversation about being a human separate from the business, when all the internet is, grow, sell, be the boss person,
Yeah.
I wanna say especially past pandemic, everything sort of shifted online for the most part.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is a pendulum swinging moment, or is this an awareness and awakening a little bit for humans themselves, where they're realizing that if we remove the things that make us human, gratitude and what we can control and what we can't control, that perhaps there's not going to be anything to relate to or to be authentic with.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's a pendulum swing. I don't, that's a good question. Is it a pendulum, right? Are we swinging? Do we ever swing back and forth?
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I do know that AI, and interacting, I use AI all the time. I think it's a helpful tool. Um, and it's it's I still hear the sarcasm in your voice around the gratitude for things that are going bad, right? That's what AI is. AI is the ever optimist, or at least chat, all right, is
Right.
the ever optimist thing that everyone, you're doing great, you're doing well, and you have to make it fight back with you. And I don't I that's why I think AI will never fully take over, because yes, it can figure out sort of what to say and how to say it and maybe how you would react to it, but it's not genuine. It's not an actual reaction. It's a response.
Right.
And in the end, we are people who want connection. I truly believe this, that in our lives, what we are striving for is connection with other people. Being able to be ourselves and have somebody see that person and accept and love that person. Um, I don't know that Chad is ever going to be able to do that. And what it takes is being a real person on the other side and saying, "Yeah, I feel that. I've been there. I know what you're going through," or "That sucks," or "I may not have all the right answers, but I'm here for you in that space." Um, I do wonder, what is gonna happen in the future with AI, and,
Yeah.
now there's AI therapists and, like,
Oh, I need so that.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay, that's okay. I was unaware. I wasn't really trying to be sarcastic earlier. Is this the idea of, business ownership had for years been just kind of reduced into this, this list, right? Do A,
Yeah.
do B, do C, and you'll be fine. And
Mm,
people who didn't do it, like, maybe you're not somebody who likes using, I don't know, some social media platform, or you're not into email marketing,
right.
that would be the thing. That's what you're missing. That's what you're doing wrong, and
Yeah.
it sort of remove that human piece of building businesses where, I feel like everybody was kinda given the cookie cutter, sort of thing, including the gratitude was a cookie cutter thing. I think that got pushed out for a while, not in a negative way. I think we do need to have gratitude, but I think, it almost got weaponized in a way where it's like you should, be grateful for everything,
Right.
and the deeper investigation into that may have been kinda glossed over.
For sure.
But
Completely agree with you.
yeah, AI therapist though, that is me on this Tuesday. Um, I'm curious as to how you replace license. I mean, my understanding. I'm not a therapist, but my understanding is
Yeah.
like it's years and years of school and supervision and licensure and
Yeah.
exams and uh what?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're in that what stage for a lot of things with AI. Like, how do we figure out what tax law knows when it's wrong, and it admits that it's wrong, how it engages with people, how it talks back to people. A therapist is not just supposed to be a cheerleader for you, right? And so, what do we do? And it, in the end, it's reading a lot of materials about therapy and how all the stuff that people are reading in schools. It's reading thousands of articles, right? So it's learning how to do that, and maybe that's why they feel like there's these platforms that can actually work. But we are in this really gray area of how this is going to change our lives. And uh, I still do hold on to the fact that it's never going to be human, no matter how many articles it reads, and no matter how much it evolves in itself, it's never going to be something that can experience, at least that we know. Um, and so that's going to be our advantage. And I think that goes to this switch of making sure that you are a full, authentic human being. People can realize that. People can see that. People can resonate with that. And we want this connection. And if you're trying to pretend, you're trying to follow a cookie cutter method that's not aligned with who you are, it's not going to come across as genuine. It's not going to come across as authentic. And so I've been doing this long enough that I know that there's no one way to build a business. Yeah, there's some fundamentals that you can do and things that you can try, but in the end, it's build, measure, learn, and take what you like and leave the rest. Right? Your business can be very different from mine, but that's okay, and we can still both have a successful, impactful, profitable business. So saying that it has to be built one way or have to do a certain thing, I don't think is true. You get to figure out what it looks like for you, and as long as you're centered in that alignment, centered in that core thing that we're talking about, your mission, vision, and values, you will find ways to get to the goal that you want.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting as we talk about things like the human in the business. Um, what does that mean, I guess, in the future of being that human? I guess it's an interesting place to be in history right
Mhm.
now as we're trying to navigate these things that are great for systems or productivity or efficiency. And then also, looking at ourselves and saying, well, what worked for us maybe a few years ago, like to the couple with the baby example, isn't necessarily going to work for us now.
Yeah.
And I wanna say at the core, I think sometimes humans, it's not so much that they've been afraid of evolving, it's the looking around at the people who knew you in one place and they're not going with you to the next place that I
Mhm.
think is maybe a major sticking point why people will not maybe wanna look and realign their values from what worked 2 years ago.
Yeah. I and this goes back to the other question that we talked about at the picnic, right? You're going your family and they see that you're different. Um, yeah, it's a hard place to be, and I don't think there is an easy answer for that. You change, you evolve, and sometimes you have to leave relationships. I'm someone who has been divorced. That was one of the hardest times in my life because I was with that person for 20 years. But we changed. Things changed. We had to evolve. And yes, there was a lot of grief around it, and there's a lot of sadness, but also it was something that needed to happen, and I'm glad it did. I'm grateful that it did. I don't know if I'm into that great gratitude place yet, but I feel different. I grew from that experience. But letting go of the past, the people, it's hard. It's not easy, and you will have to grieve and um, try to figure out how you can be better on the other side. What are you going to learn from this? Why is this happening for you? Why is this happening for you? What are you going to learn from this situation? Um, And like I said before, just because something ends doesn't mean it was bad. Just because something changes doesn't mean you're a bad person. Or because a relationship changes doesn't mean either of you are bad or wrong. Just isn't the right fit anymore. And um, you have to move on. You have to evolve.
Yeah. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate, and I did not know you had a philosophy degree. I love it. Um,
Can you tell?
I do. I absolutely adore the deeper look at the human in the business, right? And the
Yeah.
decisions that are made and what the business has to carry and what the owner has to carry and how we do sometimes maybe need a little grace as business owners as we're trying to figure ourselves out as well as figure out the business. I sometimes believe that grace in the business community is a little short supply.
Yeah.
Um,
For
so I really appreciate this conversation. Where can people find you, reach out to you, talk to you, and perhaps have a conversation with you about whether or not their values personally are still aligned with their business values?
Yeah. Well, my website is btfinancial.com. That's where you can find the podcast. I have a podcast called Mission Driven Business, where we have conversations like this. I have short little snippets of where I give advice around being human in a business and making sure that you are evolving in a way that is aligned with who you are and what you want to build. I'm also active on Instagram at BT Financial and LinkedIn at Brian Financial. So social media, you can find me anywhere, but reach out. I love having conversations like this. These really inspire me, and I learn so much from them. So I appreciate you having me on.
Amazing. All right, we're going to put all that down in the show notes. So you can find the podcast, you can find all the social media links, you can reach out, have a conversation with Brian and I'm gonna encourage everybody who's listening today that if you haven't given it a moment's thought that your values as a human and your values as a business, need to be aligned but can be distinct. And you are a whole human being separate from what you do for a living or, from your founder identity. I would encourage you to take a moment this week and think about that. And if needed, reach out and see if you can't get some real support about becoming that human
Yeah.
in your business. So thank you so much for this very important conversation and reminder. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Don.
All right, we'll talk to y'all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to dawnkennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube, as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.